Years ago, I was doing youth work in upstate New York, and it was an overnight retreat or some such thing, and we had Twinkies, and we had Doritos, and we had Diet Coke, and we had root beer, and all the things that you could want for a youth get-together. And somebody said, "Hey, this is just like Eucharist." And I thought to myself, it kind of is, because we're all around a common table, we're all sharing food and sharing fellowship, but it really wasn't Eucharist. So the question comes to us, why do we use bread and wine? Well, a lot of people say that the Last Supper, in which Jesus memorializes this feast as something to be done in memory of him, was a Passover meal in which food is ritually taken and blessed and then shared. So we say we take bread. Why bread? Well, bread is something that's made of wheat, something that can be leavened or unleavened. Typically in communion it's unleavened bread. You know that we have wafers that are wafer thin, and we also have a large priest host that we break into little pieces that are sometimes triangle or different shaped. Why unleavened bread? Well, because it's the elemental aspect of the wheat and the grain being baked, something that they've done from 4,000 years back through Old Testament times with Abraham and Sarah, baking bread to share with people who are visiting them. So you wouldn't just use a maple leaf cookie for communion, because there's a lot of preservatives in here. There's even a cream filling. You wouldn't really use that for communion because it's kind of too worldly, right? But earthy, that's what you want. You want something simple. You want something plain. You want something of the ground that can be given back to God. And why wine? Especially when those of us who don't consume alcohol are kind of offered the cup to drink communion. Well, again, wine is something that comes from grapes, fermented grapes. Grapes are something from the earth, something very elemental about that. But also, it's a festive drink, and it was used for festivals back then. So of course, at the table, when you're commemorating Christ's body and blood, you would use not only bread, but you use wine to celebrate the festiveness of it. You know, you wouldn't use water necessarily, even though we use water in the wine at communion, and that comes from John's crucifixion scene where the sword was piercing Jesus' side, and not only blood, but also water spilled out. We wouldn't use water for communion no matter how much we like to change it into wine. What about V8 juice? This comes from the earth, doesn't it? Well, yeah, but not really. I mean, again, it doesn't really have a festive quality. You really wouldn't serve this for a Thanksgiving meal, for example. And certainly not something like Diet Coke, because it's too fizzy and too sugary. It's not very festive, and frankly, it's a little unsacred, I'd say. So, that's why we use bread, and that's why we use wine at communion. The idea that we're sharing a meal is probably the more important aspect of communion for me, but what we share, the elemental aspects of bread and the festive aspect of wine, brings us together at a table to remember Jesus and his Last Supper. Thank you.